As a joint standing committee on energy will come to order, please. The clerk has previously taken a silent roll. We have established a quorum. I recognize the senator from Harrison for the purpose of adoption of the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee approve the minutes from the September 12th and October 16th meetings as before us in our packets.
You've heard the motion. Are there any corrections to the minutes? So the motion for the committee is the adoption of the minutes from September 12th and October 16th meetings. All those in favor signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes carried. The minutes are approved and they are adopted. The Senator from Marion has asked for recognition before we begin the substantive. He wants to introduce the guest, Senator Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I asked unanimous consent of the meeting to stand in recess just to let me do an introduction.
Is there objection? No objection?
Thank you,
Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I had some good friends in the back of the room, some hardworking coal miners that I've had the privilege of working for and representing most of my adult life. They come from McElroy and Shoemaker Mine, and they come today to see their legislature in action in a committee that's very important to them. They're coal miners. They mine coal for us, which supplies most of our energy in the state of West Virginia. So I'd like to recognize Bobby Powell from Local Union 1473, Danny Laverty from Local Union 1473, John Baker from Local Union 1638, John Haker from 1638, and Tim Richmond from 1638. And those are the McElroy and Shoemaker mines that operate here, right here in the northern panhandle of West Virginia. And also, Mr. Chairman, we have two special guests with us to do great work for pneumoconiosis, black lung, the horrible disease that coal miners suffer from when they spend too much time in that industry. We have Leanne Flowers and Kathleen Richmond, and they're with WVU Medicine Black Lung Center. Please, with the committee, make them all feel welcome.
Thank you, Senator. To our guests, welcome to our guests that have come to may give us a presentation today. I especially want to welcome you and appreciate your coming today. I'm going to proceed by, we have a presentation today by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and we have representatives here. I'm going to introduce the Mr. John Pelcha, who is the Senior Government Liaison with the NRC, and allow him to proceed and introduce his people as he sees fit.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here and your your crew for being here today as well. Thank you.
We're delighted to be here. We thank you. Chairman Anderson, Chairman Smith, and distinguished members of the committee. My name is John Pelsha. I'm the Senior Government Liaison Officer for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Region 2 office in Atlanta, Georgia. On behalf of my regional administrator, Ms. Laura Dews, it is our pleasure to be here to present to this joint committee of the West Virginia Legislature. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, not quite yet. Let's go to Plan B for slides.
Okay, we'll move it up here and see if it's a location issue.
Yeah, let's execute advanced slides for the manual.
It looks like, yeah.
You sure?
Okay.
All right. I think
Just-
we
yeah,
need to-
just tell
Let's
me
go to
the-
Plan B.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission is an independent federal agency led by 5 commissioners who are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. 2,700 staff work in our headquarters office in Rockville, Maryland, and in 4 regional offices. Our mission is to license and regulate the nation's civilian use of byproduct source and special nuclear material to ensure public safety and health, to ensure and promote the common defense of our nation, and to protect the environment. We accomplish this mission by licensing, inspection, enforcement, and event response. Next slide, please. Today, at the subcommittee's request, we are going to address 3 specific areas. Discussing new reactor licensing and advanced reactors is Mr. Stephen Philpott, and Senior Project Manager in the Advanced Reactor Licensing Branch of the NRC's Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. Discussing the oversight of fusion systems is Mr. Duncan White, a Senior Health Physicist, the agency's technical lead for fusion rulemaking in the NRC's Office of Nuclear Materials Safety and Safeguards. Finally, presenting an overview on the reactor safety oversight process is Mr. Stephen J. Campbell, a Senior Reactor Systems Engineer in the Reactor Inspection Branch in the NRC's Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. But before we proceed, I'd also like to introduce Michael Wenzel at the end of our group. He is the Chief of the Advanced Reactor Licensing Branch. And we thank you very much for this opportunity to present. Steve?
Great. Thank you, John, and thank you to all the committee members for having us. Again, my name is Steve Philpott, as John mentioned. I'm in our Division of Advanced Reactors and Non-Power Production and Utilization Facility, which is a very long name. Here, focusing on the advanced reactor side of that today. We'll go to the next slide. There we go. Wanted to start with a little bit of a description of some reactor concepts. Because there sometimes can be some confusion with terminology. I think even the request from you came to give an update on small modular reactors or SMRs. So there's some terminology just to clear up in the beginning, and that is the definition, the terminology of small modular reactors, SMRs, advanced reactors, non-light water reactors. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act passed in 2019 had a definition of advanced reactors. That talk about reactors that contain improvements over existing reactors that were in construction at that point. And there have been further definitions. The NRC interprets that definition to include both small modular light water reactors, so reactors that are cooled by water designs similar to current fleet of reactors, as well as advanced reactors or non-light water designs that use different types of coolant, different technologies. So within the, internationally, you'll see a lot of times they'll refer to everything as small modular reactors. And so sometimes there could be some confusion about what's meant. At the NRC, they all fall under the umbrella of advanced reactors. We consider them all to be advanced reactors, but we break them down into kind of 2 main groups, which is what we call small modular light water small modular reactors, that are more kind of on the 300 megawatts or less electric type size of plants, or scaled down modular versions of the water designs. And then non-light water reactors, which are all these other technologies I'll talk a little bit more later. And those range anywhere from 1 megawatt electric microreactors all the way up to, several hundred megawatt electric. Next slide, please. So starting with the licensing pathways for licensing an advanced reactor or any new reactor within the United States. The Atomic Energy Act granted authority to the NRC to license and regulate commercial or civilian reactors in the United States. So for all commercial civilian plants, you have to get NRC approval before you can build and operate a nuclear power plant. The NRC maintains oversight of those plants throughout the life of the plant. So from construction through operation, decommissioning, et cetera. If you want to license a plant today, you have two main pathways within the NRC's regulations that are in Title 10 of the Code of Federal Regulations. So Part 50 was the original licensing pathway for most of the existing fleet, has been licensed through Part 50, the regulations in Part 50. And that is considered a two-step process, because you start by applying for a construction permit to authorize the building the plant, and then separately you follow that on with an application for an operating license, which would allow you to operate the plant. Later we developed Part 52, which was an evolution that is considered a single-step process. And Part 52, because it combines the construction permit and the operating license into one application. So and what we refer to as a COL, or a combined license. And so that process is used recently for the Vogtle designs. There's other options within not only just a COL. We'll talk about a little bit about the details there. There's other things you can do. You can get an early site permit, design certification. So that NuScale had a new design certification approved earlier this year under Part 52. So, and then lastly, in the future, what we're working on now is Part 53. So this is one of the cornerstones of our work to develop a new licensing framework for new technologies and new plants. This is a rulemaking that's underway right now, and this is aimed at developing a technology-inclusive, performance-based licensing pathway for these new reactors and new designs. NEMA, the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, told us to develop a technology-inclusive and a risk-informed, performance-based framework, and Part 53 is one of the key parts of that. That is with the Commission right now under review and is due to be published in mid-2025, pending direction that we get from the Commission on that proposed rule. So, thank you. Okay, so I thought I'd give you just a little bit more detail on each of these processes. So the Part 50 process that I mentioned, again, you said the applicant would, the utility or the applicant would submit a construction permit application, and we review that construction permit application, the safety of the plant based on the preliminary plant design. So it's not a complete finalized design yet at that point. And we review that for this, the safety of the design, as well as the suitability of the prospective site. And if it meets the NRC's regulations in those areas, we would issue a construction permit to allow them to start building the plant. You'll notice on this slide, there is a public hearing noted on there before that construction permit is issued. The public hearing is one of the ways that public involvement can be involved in this process. So the Atomic Energy Act and our regulations require mandatory public hearings for some of the licensing processes, and then there are other opportunities for additional hearings at certain points. So the step two, the operating license application, at some point while construction is ongoing, so after we've issued the construction permit, they start building the plant, then the applicant can submit their operating license application while the plant is being built. That operating license application is based on final design information. And again, we review that based on that final design, and we make sure that it meets all the safety and environmental requirements. So, you will see there's also an opportunity for public hearing, it says public hearing opportunity in the operating license is not required, but if folks who have potential interest in that operating license can petition for a hearing at that stage. So though we refer to those often as contested hearings, if you have a contention that the public wants to make or a stakeholder wants to make. I will note that a construction permit does not guarantee you that you'll get an operating license. So when I say you, I mean an applicant would get an operating license. So you're proceeding a bit at risk, right? There's more risk in this process. The advantage is it allows you to start building the plant earlier, right? But because once you've got that construction permit, the risk is that you still have the opportunity for hearings or contentions during the operating license process, or if you can't, the final design can't meet our regulations, there's no guarantee we're going to grant the operating license. So many of the, as I mentioned, many of the current fleet, most of the current fleet was licensed under Part 50, and many of the new designs, advanced reactor designs are using the Part 50 process, a construction permit, because of the factor that they can start earlier with building the plants. So next slide. So Part 52, again, this is the single step process that combines both the construction permit and the operating license into one application. So when that application comes in, they have to have final design information. And so we're reviewing the final design and all the programs that would be needed to license and build that plant. This slide does show also, I'm going to get to a little bit later, the parallel paths, both environmental review, you see on the green path on one side, and the purple or magenta path on the other side is representing the safety review side. So those two reviews are the key areas, the key components of the overall review, and will eventually inform the commission on the decision whether to award the grant the license. So when we issue a combined license, we're authorizing them to build and operate the plant. Now there are criteria that they have to meet once the plant is built and show that we call them inspection tests and acceptance criteria that they have to meet before they can actually load the fuel and operate the plant. So there's still some checks after the plant is built before they're allowed to actually start the plant. So. Okay. Some of the other things that you see that you can do under Part 52, you can apply for an early site permit, which basically lets you kind of pre-approve a site without having your reactor design picked yet. And that looks at site criteria, make sure it's a safe site for the plant. Emergency preparedness considerations, things like that. Design certification, which is like a rulemaking where you can have a design reviewed and approved via a rulemaking, which then becomes a part of our regulations that can be referenced later in an application in a COL or combined application. Standard design approval is similar but does not use rulemaking. And then a manufacturing license is what you can use to build a full plant, full-size reactor or significant portions of a reactor at a different site from where it's going to be operated. So just some options there. All right, next slide. So Part 53 is, as I mentioned, is the heart of our efforts to developing a flexible, technology inclusive, risk informed licensing approach. And it's kind of the keystone of building that regulatory framework. But there are many other activities that go along with that in terms of preparing for that framework. Just to explain some of the buzzwords you see on the slide here, technology inclusive means that Part 53, that pathway, when it's available, you can use it for any type of technology. It's designed to be inclusive of all different technology standards. Our current regulations were built and are mostly geared toward those existing light water designs, right? So this is meant to be more neutral. I will note that even when Part 53 is available, a plant still could use Part 50 or Part 52 regulations, right? Those are options of licensing pathways that you do. Risk informed, we talk about we're scaling the requirements of our review to based on the risk and the consequences of the facility, and performance based is referring to the fact that the regulation aims to create clear and objective criteria that can be used to assess the performance, and the licensees have the flexibility to determine how to meet those performance criteria. Okay, next slide. So here's where I started to mention the parallel reviews. I'm gonna, and we get to it a little bit here too. I'll spend a couple slides kind of talk about how these go in parallel. If an application is accepted, we proceed with an environmental review and a safety review. So, and those are focused on developing two key documents, right? So the environmental review will typically result for a commercial or power reactor will result in an environmental impact statement typically. There's some other reviews that potential for an environmental assessment rather than an EIS, and then the safety side would result in a safety evaluation report. Those reports then inform the commission or inform the commission for a final decision on whether to grant the license or the permit, the construction permit, for example. So the environmental review complies with the National Environmental Policy Act, of course, among other statutes as well, like the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, National Historic Preservation Act. There are a number of considerations that go into the environmental review. And it basically describes the affected environment, and looks at a number of different resource areas. And then it assesses the consequences of the action, or supposed action, which would be, the application to build a plant, and describes that as the impact levels. So, and evaluates those impact levels in small, medium, moderate, or large, and then results in a recommendation to the commission about whether to approve the application. On the safety side, the Atomic Energy Act and the Energy Reorganization Act are the key legislation that give us the authority to conduct this review. We look at, as part of that safety review, it's not just design information, we're evaluating how the design accounts for environmental conditions like extreme weather, earthquakes, tornadoes, et cetera. It's just one part of that review. So one of the key things to kind of note here is that the safety review evaluates the impacts on the facility from the environment. So that's part of our siting considerations, our hazards evaluation, and I'll talk about some of the areas that we look at later. Whereas the environmental review takes into account or is looking at how the proposed plant would affect the environment. So it's the impacts on the environment from the licensed activity. So, okay, next slide. Okay, there we go. Okay, so I mentioned that our current regulations are based primarily on light water technology, the original designs of light water technology, and we have we're developing this technology inclusive framework. So there's a lot of significant differences in the way these plants are operated, how they're controlled, how they're moderated. But fundamentally, it comes down to some key fundamental safety functions that we review as part of a safety review. So every application has to define what are called principal design criteria. Those principal design criteria, they form the basis of the safety case for an application for a plant. Okay, so and those principal design criteria, we have in our regulations, the design criteria that tell you how to establish those design criteria for your design. But ultimately, and there are a number of areas that are spelled out in Part 50 and our general design criteria. I think there are like 64 criteria, but it ultimately boils down to these key fundamental functions. And that's reactivity and controlling the power of the reactor and how you're going to control the reactivity. The fuel is a key component of that, how you maintain the condition of the fuel, how you qualify the fuel to be used in a plant, and the systems you use to control that reactivity or the power of the plant is one key area. Heat removal, obviously you're generating a lot of heat in these plants, so heat removal is a key fundamental function, and what systems you used, whether both reactor coolant systems and backup systems to remove that heat and keep the plant under its temperature limits. So, and then radionuclide retention, by that meaning keeping any sort of radionuclides that within the plant are contained within the system of the plant, and then it's making sure that there are appropriate barriers to keep that on site. So, okay. So this just provides a little bit more detail of some of the key topic areas that I was alluding to within those fundamental safety functions. The safety review looks at a number of things. I mentioned the fuel qualification and reactivity control, things like instrumentation and control and radiation protection programs for both workers and the public. Accident analyses, looking at potential accidents and understanding based on the design of the plant what the potential accidents are and that you have appropriately analyzed those and have your systems in place to prevent and mitigate any potential accidents. And then operational programs, there's a whole host of operational programs that are part of the application as well that we review to make sure that the plant will be operated and meet the safety requirements of regulations and the adequate protection of public health and safety as noted in our mission. So, okay, skipping ahead to then the environmental side. So the environmental review, this shows typically for the process for an environmental impact statement. And typically, like I said, for a power reactor, we would issue an environmental impact statement as the result of this environmental review. And it starts with, once we receive an application, we would publish a notice of intent to conduct a scoping process. The scoping process is where we go out and we meet, we announce that we're going to meet with the public in the local area, in the affected area where the plan is proposed to be built. We gather public comments both at meetings, or they can submit written comments during that scoping period. And then that's followed by, we do issue a scoping summary report to let people know what comments we received. We move on to an information gathering period where that's where we start gathering information to prepare the EIS, and we might do a site audit. We will do a site audit and usually meet with local officials and start gathering our independent information to confirm the information that's submitted in the environmental report. The applicant submits an environmental report, we do this review, and ultimately it results in an environmental impact statement. We publish a draft environmental impact statement, have it available for public comment for some period of days, typically 45 or 60 days. And then ultimately we address all those comments and inform the public how we've addressed those comments and publish the final environmental impact statement. Next slide. So when we're preparing this EIS or environmental impact statement, we assemble a team of analysts with backgrounds in the necessary scientific and technical disciplines, and we gather all that information in a wide range of topics. And this just shows, a list of a number of areas that we look at are represented on this slide. And essentially, as I mentioned before, we assess what the affected environment is around the plant, what the baseline conditions are, and then for each resource area, we look at what the potential consequences are. We look at alternatives as well. We compare the impacts of the proposed plant on alternatives, and that's described in the environmental impact statement as well. So, and then we also do need to consider cumulative impacts, which means we're looking at not only the application for the current action, but past actions as well as reasonably expected future actions in that area and what the cumulative impacts are. So we're also required to do, under the National Historic Preservation Act, requires us to do consultations on historic and cultural resources to evaluate those, and including interactions with tribes and other state officials as well. So, okay. Okay, coming down to the last few slides here. Wanted to give you just a little update on what we're seeing for, go back to the next slide. No problem. Wanted to give you a view. We've been preparing for advanced reactors and small modular reactors for a number of years. And so we have a few reviews underway right now, as a matter of fact. So, Kairos Power is a company that we have a test reactor, the Hermes test reactor is under review right now. That's a 140 megawatt electric, it's a salt-cooled high temperature reactor. We just recently completed the mandatory hearing, I think back in October, a few weeks ago, for that construction permit application. And then they actually have a second test reactor, Hermes 2, which is a dual unit follow-on to that as well, that we recently accepted that construction permit application, so that one's under review as well. Then Abilene Christian University is they submitted a construction permit application last year for a small to 1 megawatt molten salt research reactor to be built on the campus of Abilene Christian University. So that review is ongoing. Like I said, was accepted about a year ago, and we're working through the review process at this point on that one. NuScale, NuScale had a design certification for their US 600 that was approved earlier this year that I mentioned. And then we had an application for the standard design approval for the US 460, which is a kind of a power up, an increased power version of their US 600 design. I'm sure you've probably seen the news recently about NuScale and some changes in with UAMPS and the carbon-free power project. So that's pretty recent news. You know, we're still working, we're meeting with NuScale soon and carbon-free power project. That was based on, we did receive an application for a limited work, what's called a limited work authorization from the carbon-free power project. And so we're working with them to see how we might wrap up those activities based on the recent announcement. However, the NuScale application for the standard design approval is still in-house. We accepted that, finally accepted that in August of this year. And our understanding is that will continue forward, right? As NuScale has the option to sell that in other places. But, and then the other thing I would note that's under review is a fuel fabrication facility, the X Energy, that's what's called TRISO-X. It's a subsidiary of X Energy, and we'll talk about it a little bit later on the next slide. And that's a fuel fabrication facility that will develop this, what's called TRISO fuel, or I'll explain a little bit about TRISO fuel, but a new fuel type that a lot of these new designs are using, but they have their own proprietary or their own specific version of TRISO that they plan to build and sort of develop at that facility. So, yep. Okay. The lower part of that slide, and it'll transition right into this slide, so you can stay right there, was just to show that we have an ongoing pre-applications with a number of different developers, both in the light water small modular reactors as well as the advanced reactors. So, and we've been engaging with a number of them for many years. This slide, this advanced reactor landscape, it gives you a little bit more detail in terms of, and breaks it down by the different technologies that I've been mentioning. Again, on the left, you have the light water reactors, the small modular light water reactors, and liquid metal cooled, the metal cooled fast reactors is usually the SMR, sodium cooled fast reactors, or that way I refer to. High temperature gas reactors and molten salt reactors. So I'll talk a little bit about each one just to highlight them. But the other thing that this slide shows you is there's some color coding here for the DOE back in 2020. The Department of Energy awarded a lot of funding at 3 different levels for their what they refer to as their advanced reactor demonstration program, which you probably have seen or maybe heard of. This at 3 different levels. The demonstration reactors are plants that were aimed to be built and operated within 7 years of those awards. So targeting the 2027 timeframe, and you'll see that the 2 there are TerraPower and GE Hitachi have a combined design, their Nature design, as well as X Energy, where those were the 2 awardees of those awards. And then you'll see, I think 5 different companies here were awarded risk reduction awards, which are a little bit further out, and then the ARC 20 awards are longer term funding to support specific components or technologies for developing those for future designs. So one thing this shows you is the diversity of technologies, right, that we're dealing with at the NRC. So when I talk about the need to create this technology inclusive framework, you can see why there's such a focus there, because the technologies are spread over a lot of different designs. A lot of these technologies were developed, many years ago, there were designs that were considered back in the 1950s, for example. So So these are not like these are brand new technologies, but they've come a long way and they're developed, and there's a lot of new developments in terms of materials and that sort of thing. So the other thing you'll see on the far right is what we refer to as microreactors. These are, as I mentioned before, microreactors are various different designs and they fall in these other technologies, but they're considered on the order of tens of megawatts, anywhere from like 1 megawatt electric to maybe 10 or 20 megawatt electric type of designs is what we would consider a microreactor. A lot of these companies are looking at making these reactors transportable. We're dealing with policy issues now to address what it would take to build these in a factory, test them in a factory, and then ship them as a full, complete fueled reactor to a site and operate them, and then have the licensing. There are a lot of issues that we have to take into account under our existing regulatory framework on how those types of reactors would be licensed. So that's something that we're working on setting up some policy issues and discussion to the commission for the consideration here right now. So you may have seen some public engagement on that. So okay, next slide, please. Okay. This is my last slide, and this is essentially this is a wrap-up slide that that talks about. I guess the thing to talk about here is, as I mentioned before, we have been working on preparing for small modular reactors and advanced reactors for several years. I mean, I think the commission put out an advanced reactor policy statement. I think it was 2008. In 2016 and 17, we put out vision and strategy and implementation plans, and we've been working to execute those plans. And then, as I mentioned, NEMA kind of directed us to develop this framework and have put specific timelines directed by Congress. So along those lines, we've been doing a number of things. We have MOUs with the Department of Energy that focus on a lot of collaboration that, helping us develop reports for fuel qualification examples, a lot of international collaboration. The key thing there is some of the key things are the policy issues, and we've issued more than 35, addressed more than 35 policy issues. These cover a whole host of areas that I think are running short on time, so we probably won't get into all the different things, but and then along not only Part 53, I mentioned over 60 guidance documents that we've been developing over the last several years. I think these numbers are just since 2018 to prepare our framework and be ready to be able to license these new designs. And we've been seeing a growing interest in these designs and applications. The pre-application engagement is really important to us. We've been engaging in public meetings. You see that over more than 140 public meetings per year, that a lot of those are meetings with vendors, with stakeholders, the Part 53 process and developing that. But all that pre-application engagement allows us to see the technologies that are coming to us, the potential applications that will be coming to us soon. So we do see, and we're preparing our staff, our tools, and like I said, our guidance documents and regulations for that, the coming wave of applications that we see. Part of that pre-application engagement is dealing with topical reports and white papers. These are reports that they can submit to us in advance of the application that we can review in advance. So, and then lastly, we've been working to achieve, exceed our schedule milestones. We have kind of generic milestones. NEMA required us to develop these generic milestone schedules for different types of applications. Those are posted on our website, and we're building our teams. We're building our core team, what we call core teams. These focused 8 to 10 technical staff per application, and working diligently to exceed or beat those scheduled timeframes where we can. So the most recent example was the Kairos Hermes review, which we completed in approximately 50% faster than what that generic schedule would be for a construction program. So. All right, so let me pass the baton here. I'm going to turn it over to Duncan White to talk to you about fusion.
Yeah, as I said, my name is Duncan White. I had the privilege last year to talk to this this committee about agreement dates. And again, thank you for the opportunity to come back this year to talk about fusion systems. So why is there an interest in this? In May of 2022, the Biden administration held a summit at the White House to talk about fusion, and largely based on their interest and their push on fusion, based on that National Academy of Science report you see listed on the slide there. And in that report, it talks about the challenge of getting a pilot plant on and ready to be hooked up to the U.S. grid to produce electricity through fusion, and laid out some framework and laid out some things to particular items that they needed to accomplish to get that done. Again, and the reason I'm putting this slide up, this is NRC has this is a federal government-wide approach to it. NRC has involved with the safety side of it. The Department of Energy is involved with promoting the technology and promoting the scale of different commercial approaches. They've issued grants, and there's other groups that are involved with international coordination, education. There's a lot of federal agencies involved, but we're just one of them. But again, this is why we're interested in it. Again, many of you probably have heard over the years, there's always a joke about fusion. It's always 20 years away, and probably a little bit closer now. Again, there's still a lot of ways to go, which we'll see in the next coming slide, but again, there's some optimism here on that. So what is fusion? You've heard Steve talk about fission, and fission you're dealing with either metallic fuel or liquid fuel. Here we're trying to put light isotopes together in a gaseous plasma, and that's hard to do. You have to have a high enough temperature, high enough pressure, and confine it long enough to fuse the deuterium and tritium atom together. And when you do that, you produce a lot of energy. You see from the slide, you have 14 MeV of neutrons and a helium atom. Again, 80% of that energy is in a neutron, and that's what you're going to use to produce power or produce heat or whatever you're going to use with that fusion reaction. The interesting thing about fusion is, again, tritium is a main, most studied isotope and probably going to be used in future designs because of the ease of fastest way to get to fusion. But tritium is not readily available, and tritium is obviously used for nuclear weapons. So the Department of Energy does have a stockpile of it, which is not available for commercial use. The only source of tritium in the world really is reactors up in Canada. They're called CANDU because they use natural uranium, but they do produce tritium. There's just not enough tritium to service a potential fleet of fusion devices, so they have to create it on site. You see on the slide on the right there about a breeding blanket, and part of it, breeding blanket is only doesn't capture the heat that you use to do what you want to do with the generate, what you want to do with the generate electricity, or what you want to do with the fusion reaction, but you have to breed tritium. That's why it's an important aspect of it. However, doing this is very difficult. As you can see from the top slide, the top arrow, excuse me, you see there's been a lot of study on fusion plasma, on how fusion would work in plasma, and there's been some recent breakthroughs at the National Ignition Facility in Lawrence Livermore, where they have actually created a net power output from a fusion reaction. Again, this is inside the chamber. A lot of work's been done there. The other part of it, other two pieces of it which are important, is materials. And there's been studies being done on that. A lot of work has been done. And on the back end, how you're going to get the heat and stuff, we're going to work on actually producing a usable breeding blanket. There's the whole back end of how do you get the, turn the turbine, how do you get the heat from that reaction or the neutron reaction to generate a commercially viable fusion device. So there's as you can see, there's a long way to go there. And again, it's a challenge to do that. And as industry has said repeatedly, fusion is hard to do, and this kind of really describes what that is. Again, the fusion pilot plant is something. Again, this is from the National Academy of Science report. Again, it just gives you a readiness. Again, fusion's not gonna happen tomorrow. It's down, it's, commercial system, a commercial plant is gonna be, it's down the road, next decade or so or longer. So why am I here talking about fusion? Why are we doing this if it's down the road? Well, Steve mentioned NEMA. In NEMA, it talks about advanced reactors, and an advanced reactor includes a definition of fusion device, a fusion reactor. They call it fusion reactor. There's a fusion device there, and it directs the NRC to have regulations and guidance in place by December of 2027. This is what we're doing it. The staff prepared a commission paper, set it up at the very end of 2022, early 2023, and the commission directed staff to regulate near-term fusion systems under Part 30. This is the same part that's used for reactor material used in medical facilities, commercial devices, radiography, the commercial radiators. This is not going to be regulated like a reactor. It's going to be regulated by radioactive material. And staff has also been told that they have to come up with a single guidance document to look at the different types of fusion technologies. And we'll look at that slide in a few minutes to approach to do that. We also had staff, directed staff is again, talks about, you see the words near-term fusion systems up there. What is a near-term fusion system? We'll look at the next slide, but again, it says it's something beyond that, they could come back to that again. Right now, we're planning for what we know we can do. There's a lot of companies out there that have big plans. We're just going to try to regulate what we know will likely happen in the coming years. The interesting implication of this, since the commission decided we're going to do this under Part 30, is agreeing states to regulate fusion devices. So most of you know here that Governor Gordon sent a letter of intent to become an agreement state. The state is working on doing that. We're meeting with them monthly. When the agreement goes into effect, and if there is a fusion device, down the road that comes into West Virginia, the state of West Virginia will regulate it, not the NRC. That's the biggest thing. And there's a reason, why we're doing that. I'll talk about a little bit later on that. So what is a near-term fusion system? Again, when we talk about radioactive material, like a medical or commercial things, we are actually controlling confinement and shielding of the material. Actually, we're not have a device that that controls the performance, or controls it like a reactor. A different approach, but again, it's fundamentally different, and explains why. Again, this is why we're doing it this way with fusion devices, because the criteria we have listed up there is, I think, justifies why this approach was the best way to go near term. One key thing is there's no fissile material, there's no uranium or thorium present. Only, as I said, there's tritium, there's deuterium, light isotopes. There's active engineering systems to kind of get this to happen, because I said it's difficult to do. You don't expect that the energy that the fusion reaction, if there's a disruption, the fusion reaction stops. That's very different than from a fission reactor, where you have continued heating as because of the design of the device. After shutdown, you should not have active heating, because the radioactive material is not necessary to prevent loss of containment. And again, the off-site doses are a lot lower. Again, the biggest concern is tritium. Tritium is a low energy beta emitter. Although there's a lot of it to be used in some devices, the modeling and what we know so far is the doses are a couple order or two magnitude lower than commercial fission plants, right now. So when we talk about fusion, basically it comes in three different flavors, really. You have magnetic confinement. These are, you've heard about tokamaks. Again, they use cryogenically cooled magnets to keep the plasma in place. These devices run continuously. All the way to the right, you see something called inertial. That's a laser confinement system. This is what the National Ignition Facility, run by Lawrence Livermore, they're the one that created the net energy output. Again, this one and the one in the middle, which is kind of a combination of the two, where you create two plasmas at either end, and merge them together. These pulse systems run like gas, they're kind of like gas engines, because you have to have it run continuously at a certain rate. And for these inertial systems, you have to create a fusion reaction like 10 times a second to have it like commercially viable. So you have to constantly feed fuel into it and, create plasma that will produce a fusion reaction. Again, the pulse rate to run, constantly running, but it's about, we call it 10 hertz, but it's like 10 times a second. So it's maybe commercially viable. No one's near that right now. For magnetic confinement, they have, they've come close to achieving fusion conditions in the confinement. They have actually, Chinese have actually maintained a plasma continuously, not at fusion conditions, but for 17 minutes. So it's been advanced done in recent years to show that this is a viable approach. So what's going on right now? Fusion R&D has been going on in this country for many years, It's all been regulated by agreement states, and it's been regulated safely by agreement states. Again, last 10 years, there's been a number of commercial companies. There's now like 44, 45 companies across the world who are pursuing fusion. 25 of them are located in the United States. And those companies have generated over $6 billion in private investment. This is what caught the attention of a number of people, that there's private investments. Again, this is not public money, this is private money. This is private money being put. In addition, besides the R&D going on, there's 2 companies right now. Commonwealth Fusion, they're building a tokamak, a magnetic confinement design right now. The plant is under construction, is to go online in 2025. It is a research plant, but they've already submitted an application to the agreement state. They expect to prove that the tokamak conditions do work. The second company, Helion, is doing the design I showed from Denver, where they have 2 pulse design. That prototype is also being built as we talk right now. That's supposed to go online in 2025. The interesting thing with Helion, they have also signed 2 purchase agreements with Nucor, a steel company, and with Microsoft to provide electricity by 2030. Very ambitious. See if they're successful or not. But again, the people are actually building things that are supposed to produce fusion again, and it has been demonstrated you can do it. So what are we doing at the NRC to? We are doing rulemaking. We are using our current definition of accelerators to piggyback on that to do a fusion rulemaking. We're doing a rather limited scope rulemaking. We are using, as I said, we're using Part 30, which is used for a number of other uses of reactor material. There are a number of things already in Part 30 that we would need to use for fusion anyhow. We don't have to recreate them because they're already there. So we're adding a few definitions. We are adding basically what's going to go in the application, what we would want. And again, we had to make a couple other specialized, very specific changes to other parts of the regulation to accommodate fusion in terms of from a rulemaking standpoint. But again, Steve talked about Part 53. Part 53 is very long document. It's very long. So. Our rulemaking is about 2 pages long. It's a lot shorter. And again, agreement states once to adopt these regulations, agreement states how to adopt compatible requirements. So there'll be a national consistency, which would be good for the commercial industry to as they wherever they go in NRC space or agreement space, will be looking at similar type of regulations. This typically doesn't exist now. The other complementary part of this is the licensing guidance. As I said, we have to write a single licensing guidance that's technology inclusive, that is going to cover these very different designs out there. And again, some use a lot of tritium, some use a lot less tritium, some they just have different approaches, and we have to write but again, they're all going to produce material, they're going to produce radiation. And that's what they're going to be focused on, is to make sure that it's safely used and that the applicant or the licensee provides that information to use that safely. And again, we're going to leverage a lot of what we already have Again, we have agreements, as I mentioned earlier, agreement states have experience in this. We have those people actively working with us, working on these documents right now. Okay, we have a number of documents we can use to leverage that. DOE has documents, guidance on that too, what we plan to do. And again, we don't plan to write any additional fusion-specific guidance at this time, just the one licensing guide. Again, this is getting doing the short term for 2027. We also have to do some other things by 2027, and I've listed there those at the bottom. Obviously, a very, very important thing is public outreach. Another one, we have to get our staff and the agreement state staff trained up to speed on that. We have to do inspection guidance to complement the licensing guidance. So that's kind of the snapshot of that. We have rolled out, we've had a number of public meetings so far in October, and earlier this month, we had meetings where we rolled out our early versions of our regulations and what we're going to do in guidance space. We expect to have more done. And what's going to happen is that we expect to have a draft regulations and draft guidance document to the commission by next fall, probably September, October of 2024. And once they approve that, it will go out for formal public comment at that point. But again, we plan to have additional public meetings before that to get input from the public, from industry as we go forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Campbell to the next part.
Hey, I'm Steve Campbell. I'm with the Senior Reactor Systems Engineer for the Division of Reactor Oversight and the Office of Nuclear Reactor Regulation. This is my first presentation to the West Virginia Legislature. I do live in the state of West Virginia in the Eastern Panhandle, though I do commute into Rockville. What I'm going to talk to you today is the objectives of the reactor oversight process, overview of the ROP, performance indicators, significance determination process, assessing performance, and the ROP action matrix. And ROP stands for reactor oversight process. What's the objectives of the reactor oversight process? Three of them right there. Obtain information and evidence that the power plant is operating safely. Second is to determine any cause of decline in performance before they actually have a safety issue. The last one is to identify any safety significant issues that may have applicability to other plants in the industry. The framework of the ROP process, you see the very top row says protect public health and safety of the nuclear power. That's the NRC's mission. The NRC's mission is supported by, the objective is to monitor performance in three broad strategic areas. So you'll see that green box, reactor safety, the orange box is radiation safety, and the gray box is safeguards. So when we talk about reactor safety, it's actually avoiding accidents and reducing the consequences of an accident. When we talk about radiation safety, we want to protect both the public and the workers from radiation exposure. The last one, safeguards, is to protect the plant against sabotage and other security threats. Below those boxes, you'll see a series of 7 boxes. Those are called cornerstones. Cornerstones within each strategic performance area are cornerstones that affect the essential safety aspect of the facility operation. So in each of those areas, if you look at reactor safety, the first one's initiating events. We would inspect the area where there's ever a cause for a planned trip or something that could cause a planned trip. Mitigating systems is another cornerstone under reactor safety. For example, if you looked at an emergency diesel generator, that would be a mitigating system equipment. If that had an issue, that's an area we look at, follow up on, characterize it with some type of color. I'll talk about the colors in a second. So those are 2 examples of the reactor safety. If you look at the very bottom, there's some purple boxes. That's the cross-cutting areas. Cross-cutting areas are licensing performance that affects the cornerstone and are therefore parts of the cornerstone. First one's human performance. What do we mean by human performance? We mean is a licensee making sound decision-making process? Do they have available and adequate resources to do the jobs adequately? Do they use very good personal work practices? Are their activities coordinated? Second box at the very bottom, perform is problem identification and resolution. Does a licensee identify problems and resolve them and prevent recurrence? Does the licensee use operating experience and implement that into their system? Operating experience would be something like another plant had a piece of equipment that's similar to what they had. They look at what happened to them and use their plant, make sure it doesn't have a problem. Last one would be to monitor self-assessments, both by themselves and by third-party reviews. The last purple box is the safety conscious work environment. It monitors, what we do is we monitor whether workers can raise safety issues without retaliation, harassment, intimidation, or discrimination. So those are the cornerstones and all the cross-cutting areas. Okay, the reactor oversight process has two main components. It's first performance indicator program. Second is inspection program that determines findings. Findings are issues of concern that are considered more than minor. Findings get screened through a process, and that process is very prescriptive. It has them determine whether that issue of concern is greater than minor. If it is, and they proceed into classifying what type of risk it is. What I mean by plant risk is, if the equipment is taken out of service, what does that do to core damage? With that equipment being out for a certain period of time, affect core damage adversely. The more issues they have with equipment out of service or issues that have a higher risk, they get a different color. Green is very low risk, white is a little bit higher, yellow up to red. And that's all based on deterministic criteria. Right. This slide shows a suite of performance indicators. Those green boxes there are basically quantitative measures of a particular attribute of licensee performance. In other words, it shows how the plant is performing when measured against established thresholds. This is like a report card that they write against themselves, and they submit it to us for review. We verify whether the report card is correct. And those report cards will come under those cornerstones there. Shows the initiating events, mitigating systems, barrier integrity, emergency preparedness under reactor safety, and also ones for radiation safety and safeguards. Okay, I just talked about the first part of the ROP, which is performance indicators. Now I'm going to talk to you about the significant determination process. The objectives of the process is to characterize any safety significant or security issue and using the best information available assigned at that color. What it also does is it communicates to the stakeholders a common understanding of what the issue is and how significant it is. It also provides us a basis for timely assessments and or enforcement actions that we need to apply for that particular inspection finding. So I just talked about PIs, which is the first part, and then the SDP process, which is the second part. Okay, when we are assessing performance, we look at the cornerstone. Cornerstone, we take our baseline inspection results, which are findings, and we also look at performance indicators and marry those two together based on significance threshold, which I talked about for the colors. And then that goes into an action matrix. If they're in a certain particular action matrix other than the licensee response column, then you'll get regulatory response. The top row is decreasing licensee performance. So as they move more to the right, you look at the very bottom, you get increasing additional NRC inspection. So you get more inspection procedures against the licensee as the performance starts to drop. You get more hours, you'll get more management interaction. You could be to a point where the plant can't operate. It's called unacceptable performance. That means that the plant is not allowed to operate. So that concludes what I wanted to talk about the RFP process. One thing I wanted to add is we look at this quarterly, both inspectors at the site, inspect the plant daily, and we have special inspectors come from the regions and look at specific programs. They issue a report every quarter. Every 6 months, the NRC staff will expand its review and include planning for the following 12 months. At the end of the year, a more detailed assessment is made and a performance report is written. With that, sit down.
Okay, so thank you very much. We appreciate the subcommittee's interest in the NRC's mission as well as the opportunity to make this presentation and address you today. We look forward to continued engagement with the legislature, and we now look forward to any questions that you might have.
Okay, at this point, we'll move if any of you have any questions for any members from the NRC who are here today to make the presentation. I would recognize you. Delegate Tesla.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Put out, this is a pretty ambitious scope that you have for advanced reactors. My question, and it's very important for this committee and this state, is we have a need of baseload power. We have baseload power. Are we going to be able to say that these reactors are going to be online at X time because the investment that we need to continue with baseload, coal, or whatever, is going to be something that we just can't start and stop. So we need some certainty. When do you think the SMR, the light water, say, when will it be operational and how many megawatts do you think? If you could project, I realize I'm asking you some things that maybe you don't know, right?
Well, maybe I can start and I'll let the rest of my panel jump in and add some further comments. I think I would start by saying that, you know, we're very much in the pre-application phase. So there's some test reactors under review right now and smaller designs that are being, and a lot of these companies are showing us their plans for iterative development. I would point you back to that advanced reactor demonstration program is one indicator. And that is the TerraPower design, for example, and the X-Energy designs. Those are, for those awards, are aimed at have operational power plants, putting out power, I think by the end of 2027. So to give you a time frame now, whether they remain on that schedule remains to be seen. I mean, we're anticipating construction permit applications from TerraPower and X-Energy sometime next year, the first half of next year, I believe.
If I can follow up on
Yeah.
real quick, I don't mean to monopolize anything, but okay, so that would be like 500 megawatts per.
On the order of like 300, yeah, 300.
Probably, if
Yeah.
both of them were in West Virginia, that would be less than 10% of the output that we have right now.
Right, and I don't think you're gonna see that these nuclear power designs are not ever intended to fully replace or, you know, obviously, you know, and create your full baseload, but would be part of the energy package, right, that they come down the road, so.
This is real instructive because we need to start thinking about, we still have to invest in baseload, in coal and whatever, gas, whatever, while these things are coming on stream, and we cannot shut that off today in hopes of. The grid can't stand it, you know.
Right, I mean, I would say that, you know, we see a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of momentum in these, the number of developers, you saw how many developers are on and the funding that's behind a lot of those, and DOE is putting a lot of money into these developments, but we are still, you know, a few or several years away before you see widespread, right, deployment, right, because it's gonna take us, you know, a few years at least to review some of these initial applications. We're expecting several applications for plants in the next few years, but it's gonna take a few years longer than that before you see widespread commercial application.
Thank you, really appreciate it.
Senator Phillips.
Could y'all possibly indicate how many jobs you're talking about at each location? After it's built and up and running?
Oh, that's a really, that's a really tough question.
That's a multi-part question. Okay, the typical light water reactor plant now is a number of hundred people, several hundred people, and then when they go into outage, that number increases significantly. But we're talking about completely different technology. We're also talking about a different scale of technology. Light water reactors are very well established technology that we started real application and development of back in the 1950s with the United States Navy. And we've had commercial nuclear power plants since the very late 50s. But we can give you a lot of good information about reliability of base loads and maybe to some extent employment. But these new technologies, we don't know because people haven't come to us with enough detail yet for us to say authoritatively, well, a typical fusion device will employ 35 people. We don't have that data for you, sir.
And I'm just wondering, because I mean, with our guest here, you know, I want to keep these guys working as long as they can.
I beg your pardon?
The coal miners, yeah, I just want to keep the coal miners working as long as they can.
Okay, well,
Because coal creates a lot more jobs with the coal-fired power plants and the coal miners, the vendors that supply to the coal mines and so forth. So we don't need to take out tens of thousands of jobs to put 200 or 300 people to work.
Now, the other thing you should consider too is obviously the constructions of any new facilities, create jobs on a temporary basis. And the other thing you have to consider too is supply chain, is the equipment that has to be used at these plants has to be supplied, and this could be locally or otherwise. And again, that's something that would add to potential jobs going forward. For example, in fusion, there's a great need in some areas for capacitors, electrical, type of products, because again, it's something that's sure supply right now. There's demand for that. So there's obviously need for greater capacity in that area. Again, it's not, I think you raised a very good question about, is it going to replace the capacity, current existing base capacity, and it's going to be, it's a long time down the road. Again, like for the SMRs and fusion plants, they're only talking about 400 or 500 megawatt plants, thermal. When they're building them, that's what they're talking about now. That's not going to replace base load on the short term at all.
Questions? Councilman Fehrenbacher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have several questions. The one that you didn't address, but I'll just tee it up. It's my impression from things I've read that outside of the United States, and I think Mr. White, you mentioned that China has demonstrated 17 minutes in these inertial reactors. How would you characterize our state of progress or ability to have commercial power generating facilities versus what might be available in other parts of the world?
In terms of fusion only, commercial, we are, two plants that I mentioned are probably the worldwide, probably world's furthest along being constructed. Again, these are demonstration plants, of course, as I mentioned. And again, they have plans for the next generation. Again, they'll be talking about having stuff, potentially power producing plants in 2030 sometime. Again, other European countries and China has basically said that they're way off from doing that. They're building their infrastructure up. It seems to be that way, as are many other countries. Again, we have the United States has the greatest concentration of fusion commercial companies by far of anybody. And the other one that's making progress is the UK. And in the UK, they've emphasized a lot of private-public partnerships to incentivize that activity and build that up. That's what they're doing. Again, they're looking at a time frame by the end of the decade or the next decade to have pilot type plants up and running. And they've already selected a site where they're decommissioning the coal facility and they plan to put a fusion facility in there if everything works out.
And how would you characterize other advanced reactor design concepts versus fusion?
Yeah, I was gonna say, when you step outside of fusion, I would say we work internationally with a number of different, both countries and agencies. So for example, the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, they have a number of committees and working groups that collect regulators and information from all different countries. We participate actively in a lot of those groups, and frankly, the NRC is one of the leading voices in some of those discussions. So, we're traveling overseas quite a bit to participate at very high levels, even at our commission and senior management levels, participating in those groups, and they do to us for a lot of guidance on that. I mean, we collaborate, we gather a lot of information from other countries too. We even work with, materials issues with the Czech Republic, for example. We have a lot of collaboration with Canada. We're doing a lot of joint reports. So a lot of these companies that I showed on my slide are trying to sell and market their designs. GE Hitachi, for example, their EWX 300, they're working with Canada. Terrestrial Energy is working with Canada. So we have agreements and memorandums of cooperation with Canada to develop a lot of joint reviews. And so that helps us inform us how Canada is viewing the approval of these designs and us to share information with them on our approach as well. We're doing other bilateral agreements with other countries as well as those international organizations. So I guess probably not the best. I think those designs were very much, I think, in line with the readiness and preparation for these reactors, both internationally and in the US. So, and similar to what Duncan's saying about the number of developers, you saw quite an extensive list who's working with us here. So,
Mr. Chairman, I have two more questions. One, I think perhaps relatively minor, but I noticed in your slide, the tritium breeding, the example said that you used lithium as a source.
Yes.
I know lithium, frankly, in the whole discussion of batteries and its connection to alternate forms of energy is, a concern based upon the strategic location of lithium resources. Is that a concern within these applications? Are there other metals that would use it, or we don't need a whole lot in these applications, or what?
That's an excellent question. Yeah, lithium obviously is used in batteries. Again, I have not heard anything about, the required need for lithium is going to cause a problem in other areas. The other interesting things is the material study part of it. They're looking at particular types of new types of alloys. And alloys, as you know, sometimes use rare earths and some other things. And again, these devices, these fusion devices are going to be, going to use a lot of electronics, a lot of stuff that obviously uses these critical minerals. So again, I'm not ready to do this going to cause a critical diversion of any type of thing. Again, there's a lot of interest capacity-wise in the United States to develop that. In fact, I saw an article this morning about, I believe they found another location in Wyoming where they think they're able to, which is good news to hear. But again, as I said, this doesn't seem that the fusion industry is going to divert, things from other areas with lithium. Again, the amount of lithium can be reused, recycled, and again, there seems to be a pretty abundant amount of material. Again, for these fusion devices, they want to recycle as much stuff as reuse as much stuff as possible, obviously. But again, as I said, depending on where the research goes, to see what type of materials they end up needing to use. But thank you, great question.
And one last question, and this is very off the wall, and I realize it's well beyond the scope of the NRC's mission and responsibilities, but with the size and scope of these reactors and the cost and all of that, my imagination suggests that the power, at least initially on this learning curve, the power cost from these facilities is going to be pretty high. Any insights that you hear from any of these, any projections as to when we'll get to what we consider a competitive power cost from such facilities?
I think the short answer is probably because I don't think are not going to be competitive commercially. I think that goes without saying. They're more going to demonstrate does the technology type of work. But you're absolutely right. For them to be deployed You know, any widespread, it has to be shown to be commercially viable. Really two things. It has to be commercially viable. It has to be competitive price-wise. It has to be accepted by the public too. I think that's part of it. And that kind of goes hand in hand. If you figure that really goes hand in hand. There's a safety aspect of it, obviously, but it's got to be competitive, you know, commercially done. I think for the next, you know, generation, the early plants, I think they're to build them, and again, they are not going to be competitive cost-wise. I don't think so.
I think some of it too is going to depend on the learning curve for us, for the workforce. We have not built a commercial large light water reactor in this country for many, many years until Vogtle 3 and 4. Vogtle 3 went much slower because we were relearning how to build a nuclear power plant. Our workforce, how to do quality assurance, how to do the work, how to make sure that work done properly, how to be properly managed. Vogtle 3 took, I mean, it's no secret, it took longer than it was expected and it cost more than it was expected. Now, in contrast, the identical plant, a few hundred feet away, Vogtle 4, is going much faster. They're now in their last series of tests to qualify themselves for full commercial operation, and they're moving much, much faster than Vogtle 3 did. So I think as we learn these new technologies, we've got to learn how to manufacture these technologies. And I think it goes to your question, you know, can we build it and can we build it effectively? Well, the first one is probably going to hurt, but we'll get better.
And I think that, just to add on to that, you know, the other thing to consider is that is one of also the, you know, the licensing upfront cost, right? And that's the part that we're involved in. And that's clearly one of the focuses of, you know, why NEMA directed us to develop this new technology framework and to develop this risk-informed and performance-based type of framework. And the number of activities that I mentioned in the presentation are really so focused on that for the last several years to make that licensing process more efficient, more, you know, to allow the licensing. And again, as similar to what John was saying, as these designers, they're going to have to build initial plants to prove these designs, right? But then eventually they can use those standard designs or those tools available in the Part 2 that I mentioned. A lot of these developers are smaller. There are a lot more passive features involved in the designs. Some of them, even the microreactors, are talking about, you know, being remotely operated. These are conversations we have to consider, you know, controlling costs and things like that. I mean, all those factors will go into play. So down the road, yeah, we'll see.
Senator Stewart.
Oh, it was a similar question, which is megawatt production, coal, natural gas versus these proposals. And if there were any, and I guess based on your question, it's just too soon to know what the cost would be. And just a follow-up point, which is I'm not aware of, I mean, there's a lot of research and development going into the nuclear area, whether it's fusion or small water reactors. I'm just not aware of how much we as a country are spending on research and development on figuring out how to burn coal or natural gas cleaner, more potently, faster, better, and stronger. I'm just not sure that it's the past as much as it might be the future if we would invest in these things.
I think the Department of Energy would probably have much better information about that, since they have insight and they have a role in all the different kinds, our entire energy portfolio. I mean, we're very focused on nuclear and we're very focused on safety. I don't want you thinking that we only have glasses like this, but we are very focused on nuclear and we're very focused on safety. We don't really give a lot of consideration to, because it's not our job. Atomic Energy Act doesn't charge us with financial oversight. It charges us with making sure that the process is safe, that it's secure, and that it protects the environment. So I'm sorry that we don't have that information. I would suggest the Department of Energy might be able to help you more with that kind of information.
Mr. Chair, just one final question. U.S. Navy's had a lot of recent patents. Certainly I'm familiar with some patents.
The Navy has had, I can't remember right off the top of my head. I want to tell you, 1957 was the USS Nautilus, the first nuclear powered submarine.
Even recently on the fusion side.
Oh, on fusion? That would refer to Duncan.
No?
I don't have that information. I don't know.
There's some groundbreaking technology in terms of.
I mean, there's,
South Korea.
I mean, a lot of what the Navy does is classified, I guess, too, but we do review naval designs in terms of, the NRC reviews naval designs of the naval reactors. That's all we do with the Navy, but, the technology and stuff that they have is in states, most of it's classified, so I really don't know the answer to that question.
Thank you, sir.
Douglas Street.
How would you say the timeline and process of our permitting process stacks up against other nations that are building similar nuclear reactors and technology?
Mike?
Yeah, we have to go to the bullpen for that one.
Yeah, I mean, so we don't really benchmark ourselves in that way, so I mean, I can't tell you definitively. I can tell you anecdotally that all countries have had, challenges in licensing, these larger, based on things that we historically licensed. So I would say that our experience is pretty similar. But with the newer technology, and just kind of touch on an earlier question, I would say we're really in the forefront in terms of like reevaluating or making improvements to our regulatory process to kind of streamline the licensing approach. And it was mentioned in the slide that has borne itself fruit with this recent Kairos Hermes construction permit application that we completed in half the time. But and another point to note in the schedule, it's not just all on us. A lot of it's really kind of incumbent on the license, the potential applicants in this application.
Is it safe to say that it would take a decade to get one up and running?
I can't, well, so these are new, novel designs that we haven't licensed before, so I can't say that definitively.
I mean, even a light water reactor that we've had since the 50s, if we wanted the state decided we wanted one, it would be at least a decade. I mean, to go from nothing to try and cut in the deal, the permit, the paperwork, construction, and have megawatts going out the lines, it's at least a decade, right?
I mean, potentially, I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into.
I mean, because I'm looking at Georgia and the timeline that Georgia took.
Yeah, I mean, so they submitted their application in 2008 timeframe, 2007, 2008, and Vogtle 3 just went online last year. So that was
15 years, yeah, okay.
But that was, that's.
I understand that there were supposedly some, issues, relearning, and all that. This isn't a plug and play thing. We're doing this, it's 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I would just offer though that the experience with the 1,400 megawatt large base load station isn't comparable to what we're talking about.
Correct, I understand the SMR difference, low scale, small scale, just kind of trying to get a general picture here.
It's not over.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, I thank you very much for being here today. This room is scheduled for another committee meeting shortly. I think to varying degrees, all the members of the committee, I'll speak for myself, and I think a lot of the members of the committee, we appreciate you being here. We appreciate the information you're sharing with us, and the more information you give us, I'll equate this to when I got my master's degree, I began to realize how much I didn't know, okay? And I appreciate your resources being available to help us as we begin to look at this in this state. With that being said, I call on Senator Queen. Is there any other business come before the committee? None, Senator Queen.
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
Senator Queen moves we adjourn. All those in favor, signify so by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, stay here. See you later.
Yeah.